Grandma's food often tasted better for 7 plain reasons you can still use in your own kitchen. And the last one is why a pot roast can cook all afternoon and still taste flat. It happens before the liquid ever goes in. Get the skillet wrong, and your meat stays pale and wet instead of building the brown crust that flavors the whole stew. Get curing, cold smoking, or a vegetable ferment wrong, and you can grow spoilage instead of preserving food. Leave a buttermilk batter sitting, and a tender biscuit can come out heavy, greasy, or soapy. Folks call old mountain cooking ignorance, or else they call every old way better. Both tales miss it. I was raised on these methods by my mama, pop, and grandmama. We will start with the skillet, then fat and the saved pot, cover preservation safely, and finish with the heat that makes the whole meal taste cooked on purpose. That old black skillet was doing real work. It was not putting iron flavor into every bite, and it could not rescue weak cooking. What it gave you was steady heat and a surface that did not fight the food. Before you use an old skillet, remember this: rancid oil and trapped food scraps make smoke and off flavors. Burnt on mess is not seasoning. Clean it until that old debris is gone. Proper seasoning is a thin film of oil baked on through repeated heating. Unsaturated fat heats, oxidizes, and forms a dark polymerized layer. That is the low stick surface. Then, cast iron holds its heat when cold batter or meat hits it, so the pan stays hot enough for browning instead of dropping straight into steam. That is why cornbread can take on a firm brown crust while the middle finishes cooking through. I do not call every black skillet sacred. If it smells of old grease and sends up foul smoke, it needs cleaning, not reverence. And if you do not own cast iron, that is conditional, not a dead end. Stainless or nonstick can be easier for eggs, fish, and low-fat cooking. Look at the pan you use most. Does food stick because the surface is dirty, or because the pan loses heat when food goes in? Remember that when we get to browning. But first, that hot pan needs the right fat. That is what decides whether a crust turns flaky or merely greasy. Lard earns its place here for a plain reason. It is mostly fat, without the water and milk solids butter carries. Work it into biscuit or pie dough, and it limits gluten and leaves little pockets of fat between the flour. In the oven, those pockets help make tender layers. That is flaky. Greasy is what you get when the fat is there, but the dough has lost its shape. But lard is not king of every kitchen. Butter brings its own flavor, and its milk solids brown. If you want that flavor along with a flaky crust, use a blend. My judgment is simple. Use the fat for the result you want. A biscuit does not care about an argument. It cares what happens to its dough. And do not throw out the liquid from greens or beans without thinking. Pot liquor has minerals, starch, protein, and seasoning already dissolved in it. Add it a little at a time to soup, beans, gravy, or bread dough. Taste it before you salt, because pot liquor is not measured stock. One pot may be mild. The next may take over the whole dish. Bones and connective pieces give broth another kind of body. Long, moist cooking turns collagen into gelatin, and cooled broth tells on itself when it thickens. Saving flavor from today's pot is one thing. Keeping food for later brings the sharper question of curing, smoking, and fermentation safety. Salt, smoke, and a crock of kraut are different methods. Salt curing lowers water activity, making growth harder for many spoilage microbes. It does not automatically destroy pathogens. Before curing, know that wrong salt, poor temperature control, or too short a cure can allow botulism, staphylococcal toxin, or spoilage, depending on the food and process. Cured meat also carries a heavy sodium load, a real constraint for people with hypertension or kidney disease. Use a tested process for that food, keep it correctly managed, and use refrigeration or freezing when that is safer and simpler. Smoke adds flavor and can slow spoilage. Before cold smoking, no food can remain in the microbial danger zone without reaching a killing temperature. Smoke flavor is not pasteurization. Do not use cold smoking as a safety step. Before fermenting vegetables, too little salt or vegetables above the brine can let mold, yeast, and soft rot bacteria outrun the lactic acid bacteria. Keep them submerged and control salt, temperature, and oxygen. Before sealing canned or fermented food in jars, unverified acid in a low-acid, airless jar can support Clostridium botulinum. A sealed lid proves nothing. Some old ways were tested because people had to use them. We do not need the unsafe part when the freezer will do. Preservation changes food over time. Acid changes biscuit batter in minutes. Buttermilk had a job to do. It was not there because it sounded old-fashioned. Its acid meets the baking soda and releases carbon dioxide, which gives biscuits and cornbread lift. That same acid holds gluten back some, so the crumb stays tender instead of chewing back at you. But the balance has to be right. Too little acid leaves soda behind, and you taste it, that flat, soapy note. Too much can leave the bread coarse and overly sour. And once that batter sits around, the useful part of that reaction is spent before the pan ever sees the oven. Before using raw milk or milk that has soured through rough handling, remember it can carry pathogens. Sour taste does not prove it is safe or properly fermented. Use commercial buttermilk or dairy you know was handled safely. Pair it with the baking soda the recipe calls for. Get the oven hot and the skillet ready first, then mix and bake it straight off. Think of acid and soda as two people carrying the same end of a table. If one quits early, the whole thing goes crooked. My mama and grandmama both knew the result they wanted. A biscuit that breaks soft in the middle. Now you know the reason. Acid can lift a batter in minutes. But why did a plain tomato, a bunch of greens, or an ear of corn often taste stronger before any skillet touched it? Food picked close to harvest often carries more of itself into the kitchen. A tomato, a peach, fresh herbs, greens, corn, berries, their aroma, sugar, and texture can fade with long holding and travel. That does not make local food automatically better or safer. A good frozen ingredient, or one held cold and ripened well, can beat a tired thing wearing a local label. The old lesson is timing, not bragging rights. Food knows when it was picked, and meat knows what kind of muscle it came from. Low and slow is for a cut that has work in it. Chuck, brisket, shank, shoulder, pork shoulder. Moist heat and time turn its collagen into gelatin so the meat softens and the pot liquid gains body. Do that to a lean, already tender cut, and you can dry it out or pull it into strings. Before you set a long pot going, remember this. Meat still has to reach a safe internal temperature. Tender does not prove that. Check safety first, then give a tough cut the time it needs to soften. If you cook tender cuts or quick weeknight meals, low and slow may not belong in your kitchen. That is fair. Before you buy meat for a braise, name the cut. Is it built for a long wet cook, or does it need a quicker fire? Choosing the right cut is only half the braise. Before liquid goes in, the pan has to build the brown flavor a simmer cannot fully put back. That brown flavor is the Maillard reaction, and it happens on a hot, fairly dry surface. Put cold meat into a weak pan, crowd it shoulder to shoulder, and it gives off steam. The pan cools, the moisture stays put, and you get pale meat simmering in its own juice. Before you brown it, remember hot oil and steam can burn skin, and an overloaded, underpowered pan can keep very cold meat wet and unevenly heated longer than it ought to. Dry the meat surface. Heat a stable pan. Work in batches with room between the pieces, and leave each piece alone long enough to take color before you turn it. Then add your braising liquid. Once liquid covers that surface, the temperature drops and browning mostly stops until the liquid cooks away. The long wet cook has its own job. It gives collagen time to turn to gelatin. Browning gives you the roasted depth. One does not replace the other. Scrape those brown bits into the pot. That is, flavor stuck to the skillet, and it belongs in the gravy. Your stew or pot roast will carry that savory brown taste through the liquid instead of tasting like boiled meat in seasoned water. And yes, a wet braise can still be good with herbs, aromatics, or a long reduction. But browning is the straight road. The old kitchen did not waste heat, fat, liquid time, or what the season had handed it. If 7 everyday methods could do that in a plain mountain kitchen, what happened to the cooking tricks folks quit using because they sounded too strange? Watch 7 banned Appalachia cooking tricks. Professionals now say we're genius. We will sort the useful ones from the ones best left gone. Keep the skillet hot and give it room.